Welcome to the Codebook Podcast. If you are with us, it means that the topic of malicious information activity is of interest to you. In our podcasts, you can delve into the shadow world of both state and non-state actors, the latter of which hardly ever come to the attention of the mainstream media. Don't forget to subscribe to us so you don't miss the next episodes. Let's go!
Hello there, friends. Today I present to you my second podcast, and I decided to dedicate it to active measures. I understand that, it may sound boring for some, but without understanding what stands behind this term, it will be difficult to understand the nature, goals, and methods of malicious actors and their activity, and of course classify it. First, I would like to say a few words about the term itself and its origin, of course. This term is a translation from Russian, and in Russian it sounds like «Активные Мероприятия». This term does not have a precise and universal definition in the West, in the English language. So we actually have to use a literal translation from Russian. This term refers to a specific type of activity carried out by the KGB during the Cold War. Active measures are a large set of overt and covert operations. The aim of this activity was to sow discord, suspicions, and division between Western nations and their allies, as well as to create an atmosphere of general distrust and hostility, of course. By carrying out active measures, the KGB tried to form a geopolitical situation and international agenda, international environment that was more favorable for the Soviet Union. Active measures during the Cold War would be divided into two groups, local and global. Local measures were intended for specific regions. For example, the KGB carried out the certain activities that aimed as a minimum to maintain tension and as a maximum to provoke war or any military actions between Turkey, Greece, and Cyprus. As part of these activities, KGB officers produced and distributed the forgeries and even considering blowing up the Atatürk house in Saloniki, Greece. Regarding global operations, one can cite as an example of this kind of active measures. This is Operation Infection, which is referred to as Operation Denver in the archives of the youngest brother of KGB, the East German intelligence service Stasi. The goal of the operation was to create and promote a false narrative that AIDS virus was created in the US military labs and intentionally spread in Africa. By the way, Russian propaganda and disinformation still use this narrative of, the so-called American secret military labs, but we will talk about this later. This operation impressed with its scale and allocated budgets, actually. The operation covered India, Africa, Western Europe, the Eastern Bloc states, South America, as well as United States, of course. The operation started in July 1983 with a publication in an Indian newspaper secretly controlled by the KGB and continued until the end of 1980s. Millions of people on different continents were exposed to the information created and disseminated as part of this operation. This narrative also found its way into the American mainstream media. Particular attention was paid to the countries where U.S. military personnel were stationed. And the U.S. military was often presented as a breeding ground for AIDS. Theories promoted as part of this operation still resonate with politicians in Africa, sometimes in Asia, and some activists in the United States. Also, one of the successful operations of the KGB carried out on the basis of forged documents was the scandal around the false allegations that the commander of American troops in Western Europe, had the authority to use tactical nuclear weapons without the consent of the leadership of NATO or the heads of European states. Listeners might wonder what is considered an active measures. To give a short answer to this question, the list of measures and operations that were carried out as part of active measures during the Cold War was in fact limited only by the imagination and creativity of KGB officers, literally. For the most part, it was the production of forged documents, reports, letters, memoirs, etc., as well as the creation and dissemination of conspiracy theories, blackmail, intimidation, compromising, creation of fake proxy organizations, support for communist and socialist parties outside of the Eastern Bloc, publication of literature which is favorable to Moscow, creation of networks of agents of influence and useful idiots, and much more. One of the priority area for KGB activity was the Middle East. While the first main directorate of KGB created and supported terrorist organizations attacking mainly Turkey and Israel, Department A was engaged in information and propaganda support for the terrorists, painting them as a fighters for freedom. Can you imagine this? Under the first main directorate of the KGB responsible for the operations abroad, there was a Department A, officers of which were in charge of the active measures. However, initiative regarding active measures was encouraged in the KGB, and officers from other departments were also able to offer their ideas, their solutions, sometimes quite crazy ideas actually. In addition, many ideas came from Soviet diplomats and KGB stations from around the world. The world has never seen such as, enormous and powerful organization engaged in such an activity. For example, Goebbels and his Ministry of Propaganda did not have even a fraction of the capabilities that KGB had. As part of the active measures, KGB officers used every opportunity to target the United States and its allies. For example, the KGB carried out active measures after the assassination of the President Kennedy. According to the theory produced by Department A, the assassination was organized by the CIA. In addition, by means of active measures, the KGB at various times tried to connect the American intelligence services to the assassinations of Patrice Lumumba in Africa, Martin Luther King, Olof Palme, and many others. This kind of conspiracy theories found a particularly great response in the media of developing countries, which are avid for all sorts of conspiracy theories. If you remember, in 2019, HBO released a quite popular miniseries dedicated to the Chernobyl disaster. But few people know that immediately after the Chernobyl disaster, the KGB carried out a series of operations as part of active measures, the purpose of which was to confuse the West and cover up the real scale of this disaster. I believe these events could also be, the plot, the scenario for a movie or even for a TV series. It should also be remembered that the KGB did not act alone. They actively cooperated with the special services of the socialist bloc countries, using their intelligence network and their assets. In addition, the secret services of the socialist states carry out KGB-style, active measures by themselves also. All Soviet institutions inside or outside the Soviet Union, including Soviet journalists, diplomats, and cultural and religious figures, assisted with or were involved in the implementation of the KGB active measures. At its heydays, the number of KGB officers involved in the active measures reached 15,000 people. Some people, including journalists and researchers, mistakenly believe that with the end of the Cold War with the collapse of the Soviet Union and dissolution of the KGB, active measures also ended. But how it's seen from Moscow actually? For the Kremlin, the Cold War has not ended. There was just a kind of short break for them. And now the Russian special services and proxy organizations under their control conduct the same active measures as during the Cold War. For the Soviet Union, the active measures were not exceptional temporary measures, but a part of the process of the permanent struggle against adversaries. Modern Russia took the active measures to a completely different level, adapting them to the realities of the modern world. Yes, I have to emphasize that they still use the KGB playbook, but they managed to significantly improve this process. In Soviet times, a special scientific institute, together with a number of other organizations and Soviet entities, developed a strategy of the war in the psychosphere. In Putin's time, this strategy was perfected and employed extensively. Here I would like to quote General Gerasimov. He is the chief of the general staff of the Russian army and the creator of so-called Gerasimov doctrine. He said that, quote, "The role of non-military means of achieving political and strategic goals has grown, and in many cases they have exceeded the power of force of weapons in their effectiveness." This is a very straightforward and profound statement. In fact, it provides a lot of insight for understanding Moscow modus operandi. And even the solution of the KGB is a kind of ploy for some naive Westerners. What the Russians did was that they renamed the KGB into the Phase B, removed border guards and protection of state leaders from their authority, which in fact even facilitate their operations. And then, on the basis of the first main directorate, which included Department A, responsible for active measures, the Foreign Intelligence Service was created. I mean, Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. Neither the global network of agents nor the crowd of agents of influence and useful idiots of the KGB have disappeared. They have all been preserved, and only the nameplates on the doors have changed in Moscow. I think it is unnecessary to remind that Lieutenant Colonel Vladimir Putin, like many other top officials of modern Russia, served in the first main directorate of the KGB. Yes, in that one. Perhaps Russia is a unique country in this regard. It's hard to find or imagine any other country where people from one intelligence service department would occupy so many top positions, including the presidency. And after that, they continued their activities with consideration to the new realities. For example, Russian interference in United States elections, this is nothing new actually. The Soviet Union also tried to influence the outcomes of the United States presidential elections. But Soviets did not have the cyber and information infrastructure and capabilities that Putin's Russia has. In modern Russia, in addition to the special services, specially created private entities are also involved in the implementation of active measures. Some believe that these are the elements of the Russian deep state, and they indeed are. For example, in the West, private Russian entities involved in the active measures are called troll factories. But it is only partially correct because the trollings make up only around 30% of their activities. Modern Russia, so-called troll factories have the same capabilities to carry out a full range of active measures as the Russian special services. Moreover, the capabilities of Russian private informal structures exceed the capabilities of average European countries in the same area, let alone those of developing countries. This is completely different picture and capabilities. Some troll factories own media holdings, contributing to the production and spread of disinformation propaganda. For example, the founder and owner of the largest troll factories in Russia, actually series of troll factories in Russia, is Yevgeny Prigozhin, who owns the notoriously Wagner Group, a Russian company that supplies mercenaries and killers for the Kremlin. In fact, without holding any government position, Mr. Prigozhin alone has greater operational and informational capabilities than the head of intelligence, for example, let's say Greece or Hungary. Prigozhin can plan and implement active measures using the infrastructure he created without the assistance of Russian special services or other official Russian structures, Russian entities. Another Russian entity that can act separately and carry out its own active measures is Gazprom Security Service, which employs former intelligence officers. The main area of their activity is continental Europe. The main goal is lobbying the interests of Gazprom, maintaining its market share and discrediting Gazprom's competitors in the European gas market. Since 2013, one of the main targets of Russian active measures has become Ukraine, the apogee of these actions being the occupation of Crimea and part of the Donbass in 2014, and of course the Russian invasion in 2022. And of course, Russian active measures are not limited to Ukraine. There is evidence of their implementation in Africa, in Middle East, in the post-Soviet states beside Ukraine, the United States, Western Europe, and Balkans. People, organizations, or even entire countries often do not even suspect that they become targets for active measures. To be fair, it should be noted that although the Russians can be considered kind of pioneers in this field, they are not the only one who use to such methods. Many other countries and even non-state actors also use elements of active measures to gain an advantage, create a more favorable environment for themselves, and weaken rivals, adversaries. Those who are interested in how the non-state actors conduct active measures can Google and check the role of the Bell Pottinger in South Africa. Bell Pottinger, this was a British-based public relation company. I believe that this will be, very interesting experience for you. Those interested in active measures not coming from Russia can Google about Iranian activity in the Middle East and the South Caucasus, as well as Chinese activity in Africa and South and Southeast Asia. Scientific progress and the advent of social networks have reduced the cost and facilitate active measures, made them almost universally accessible. Another problem is the shortage of sufficiently qualified specialists to counter this activity. The advance of artificial intelligence and deepfake technologies is another facilitating factor for those who conduct active measures, as those technologies provide entirely new opportunities for them. Perhaps I will dedicate one of my podcasts to this topic in the future. So, dear friends, thanks for being with me and for your interest in this topic. I hope I was able to shed some lights on it for you. And goodbye, and see you in the next episode.